Hey guys, Todd Vandermind here, back again for another edition of Freedom Steel. Former NRA contract lobbyist, all-around Illinois gun law guru, and things are just keep piling up, and it's fast and furious in the world of 2A litigation these days. And like I said, every time you get an idea and want to go down over here, and it's squirrel, and something else pops up for us. But yesterday, the federal firearms licensees, along with GOA, GSL, Pius Armory, and some other individual named plaintiffs, a suit that is supported by the Aurora Sportsman's Club, filed a motion for a preliminary injunction in their case in Southern Illinois. Now, that is one of three cases that is pending before Judge McGlynn right now. So, with that, this is a case I've been helping on, I've been working on. It's being spearheaded by Shaw and Associates and Danforth and Associates, our local counsel, along with Chuck Michelle from California, who's been a longtime litigator in these 2A issues out there. They are the ones who prevailed in the Duncan case, the Cali Mag ban. So with that, these lawsuits. So you have Second Amendment Foundation over here. You've got NSSF over there. Both of those cases deal with the issue of guns and magazines. There is a tangential reference to parts in the SAF case. However, the case that was filed here deals with guns and parts. The reason is that if you've seen the Oregon decision and some others where they have claimed that magazines are not arms under the term of the Second Amendment and so on and so forth, that they're really trying to parse this stuff down. So there was a tactical decision made that we think when you're limited to 20 pages in a brief, that the magazine issue could take up all 20 pages. Not wanting to short shift arguments, decided to break things out. We broke them out a little differently because we think the parts go to the guns and are a better fit right there. And the reason is that if you go back to what New York said that if it is covered by the text of the Second Amendment, then it is protected conduct. So here, we're looking at the text. And if you go through, you had Heller, the right to keep a firearm for lawful purposes, such as self-defense within the home. The antis always forget the such as. And so you had Ezell come up after that in the Chicago District Court, in the Court of Appeals in the Seventh Circuit, in Ezell, so that you had a right to maintain proficiency and train and practice with your firearm, that was part of the Second Amendment, and that you had the right to acquire a firearm, which is part of the Second Amendment. So naturally, if you have a right to acquire a firearm, there has to be somebody selling the firearm. So getting all of these things announced or enumerated in the text of the Second Amendment is important. And it becomes more important as you'll see down the road. But what we're working on here is that when they threw the whole parts, attachments, and all that gobbledygook into this law in Illinois, I think they made an overstep, and they have given us a huge opportunity here to take more ground. And that is through the text of the Second Amendment. Because New York said, if it's covered by the text, it's lawful conduct, the burden then shifts to the government to prove that the conduct was the regulation is conducive with the history and traditions of this country. Well, let's go back here. So what we argue in our motion for a preliminary injunction is that for the reason even pre-Bruin, precedent confirms that the right to possess firearms implies a corresponding right to obtain them, and the parts, ammunition, magazines, and accessories necessary to use and repair them. So here's a big thing. Right to repair. You've heard it in context of farm equipment, motor vehicles, things like that. But here, if we have the right to maintain proficiency with a firearm, to train with a firearm, to practice with a firearm, then we naturally have the right to maintain that firearm in good working order. We have the right to repair it if it breaks because of a part failure. We have the right to modify it if our needs change, if our if our physical attributes change. Somebody, God forbid, loses part of a limb and they need to modify their firearm so they can hold it or adjust it or grip it or anything like that. But we have the right to repair a firearm, to keep our firearms in good working order. Now, within this case, we also bring up the Zell case. Kudos to Rhonda Zell. And in there, we also talk about, because Naperville's case, they've tried to outlaw the sale of magazine-fed semi-auto rifles. And so we're trying to get at, because if there's no ability to acquire these firearms, it inhibits, it infringes, it impedes the right contained within the text of the Second Amendment. And the court held the right to possess firearms for protection implies a corresponding right to acquire and maintain proficiency in their use. That was from a Zell that was also cited in Illinois Firearm Retailers Association v. Chicago. It's a 2014 case. The court recognized that the Chicago's ban on gun sales burdened the Second Amendment because it prevented Chicagoans from filling within the limits of Chicago the most fundamental prerequisite of legal gun ownership, that of simple acquisition. And like I said, if there is a right to acquire, there has to be a corresponding right to sell. You go on that, the core Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms for self-defense wouldn't mean much without the ability to acquire arms. That's in Jones v. Bonta. So here in the Naperville case, they have argued ad nauseum there is no right to sell assault weapons. Well, bullshit. There have been several court rulings, even here within the Seventh Circuit, that said there's a right to acquire. In order to have a right to acquire, you have to have the right to sell. Somebody's got to sell them, either in a retail commercial setting or in a private setting. So if you'll notice here, we're setting up not only a contention for the ban is unconstitutional, what we're also trying to establish here and explain that within the text of the Second Amendment comes the right to sell, which we think has been announced in other court decisions. We want to make that even more clear. But then you also have the right to repair and maintain your firearm in good working order. If you have the right to repair your firearm, you have the right to assemble your own firearm out of the parts that you have collected. There are a lot of people today who are in the position of having an AR-15 lower receiver or a Glock frame. And now, because of this law, they can't get the parts to finish those guns. And so if you have the right to repair, you have the right to acquire parts, you have the right to assemble your own firearm. And having all of that found by the court to be contained within the text of the Second Amendment is why when they passed this thing and I was reading it, I've said that they may have actually given us a gift, because now they are giving us the ability to have a very public debate about the text of the Second Amendment that the court in New York said was so important, because if it is covered under the text, it is protected conduct. And then the state, the government, whoever, has to sit there and find a historical tradition, law, or analogy that shows that that type of conduct was unprotected. They've been reaching back to laws about Bowie knives. Now here, there may have been laws against carrying Bowie knives. Okay? Doesn't say there was a law against manufacturing Bowie knives, making your own Bowie knife, owning a Bowie knife, using a Bowie knife out on your farm, ranch, or wherever. Walking through town with one sheathed up. Maybe there were a couple of laws against that. Whether or not the court finds that persuasive and to be more normal and not the outlier remains to be seen. But we certainly have a history and tradition in this country of building our own firearms. And that's why I think in this case, we're not just looking at the gun ban right here at the tip of our nose. We're looking down the road. We are looking in a three-dimensional chess game. And the Speaker of the House, President of the Senate, they can go play chutes and ladders. We're looking for a much longer end game. And that's why the approach is being taken the way it is here. That's why we didn't talk to them a whole lot about the bill that they were doing. So if you see what we see, and if you think about what we're doing, I think you'll see why the team that has been built around this lawsuit is putting together a different type of fight. And it's not just a fight for today. It's a fight for next week, next month, next year. This is designed for us to make sure that we get as much encapsulated within the text of the Second Amendment as we can, to protect as much of our rights as we can, and make those the centerpiece and the normal part of the Second Amendment, from training to owning to repairing to building, that all of that fits within the text, tradition, and history of our nation. So guys, that's it for this one. Just wanted to talk to you about why this suit is different. I will have links if you want to contribute to the cause, to FFL Illinois, to the Second Amendment Law Center, or the Second Amendment Defense and Education Committee that the Aurora Sportsman's Club has started up, which is a 501c3 type organization. Guys, just click on those below. We appreciate everything. As always, hit the like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and copy and paste the link to this to other social media sites or blogs or forums or whatever. We really appreciate it. Getting some good feedback from people. We'll try to answer as many comments as we can. So let me know what you're thinking. Leave a comment behind. Tell your friends. And as always, frag out.